Welcome to tonight's journey through the quiet realms of Earth's forests. As you settle in, perhaps the day's worries still linger at the edges of your mind, or maybe you're simply seeking a gentle path toward peaceful rest. Either way, tonight we'll wander together through the living cathedrals that blanket nearly one-third of our planet's land, the forests that breathe alongside us, their rhythms ancient and steady. As you prepare for sleep, imagine the soft cushion of moss beneath your fingertips, the filtered light dappling through layers of leaves above, the gentle symphony of rustling branches and distant bird song. Tonight, we'll explore not just what forests are, but how they live, how they communicate beneath the soil, how they change with seasons, and how they've shaped our world for hundreds of millions of years. In these green realms, time moves differently. A single heartbeat in the life of an ancient redwood might span a human generation. The mushroom you see emerging from forest soil may be just the flowering body of an organism that spreads for miles underfoot, connecting hundreds of trees in a network as complex as any human creation. Here, in the forest, everything is connected, from the tallest emergent tree piercing the canopy to the tiniest microbe in a teaspoon of rich soil. Let yourself drift with these words as we move unhurriedly through the world's woodlands, from the misty temperate rainforests where moss cloaks every surface, to the bright deciduous forests that transform with dramatic seasonal changes, to the evergreen boreal forests that encircle the northern hemisphere like a living crown. The journey is gentle, meant to carry you toward rest even as it illuminates the quiet marvels of our planet's green lungs. Long before humans walked the earth, forests were spreading their roots and reaching skyward. The first true forests appeared around 385 million years ago, during what scientists call the Devonian period. But these were not the forests we would recognize today. There were no flowers, no fruits, no birds singing from branches. These primeval woodlands were dominated by strange, primitive plants, towering club mosses, giant horsetails, and peculiar fern-like trees that would seem alien to our modern eyes. The tallest among them, a plant called Archaeopteris, grew nearly 90 feet tall, with a woody trunk and branches bearing fern-like fronds instead of leaves. These ancient forests lacked the complex layered structure of today's woodlands. They were simpler yet revolutionary, the first time in Earth's history that plants created environments with their own internal climate, their own ecosystem, their own architecture rising high above the ground. As these first forests spread across the continents, they began changing the planet itself. They pulled carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, cooling Earth's climate. Their roots broke down rock, creating the first complex soils. When they died and were buried, their bodies eventually transformed into the coal deposits we mine today, ancient sunlight stored as carbon, preserved for hundreds of millions of years. Every time we burn coal, we release the energy of that Devonian sunlight, captured by forests inconceivably distant from our moment in time. Through millions of years, forests evolved. The dinosaurs witnessed the appearance of the first flowering plants, the angiosperms, which would eventually transform the woodlands with their explosive diversity. Conifers spread across the northern lands, their needle-like leaves adapted to shed snow and conserve water during freezing winters. By the time mammals rose to prominence after the dinosaurs' extinction, forests had become complex tapestries of life, layered, interconnected communities supporting countless species. And now, as you breathe slowly, imagine walking into a modern forest. Not all at once does it reveal itself. First, there is the edge, that transitional zone where open land meets the beginning of a tree cover. Here, sunlight still reaches the ground abundantly, and shrubs and young trees compete vigorously for space. Wildflowers bloom in bright patches and birds dart between exposed perches. The forest edge is a busy place, rich in biodiversity, where two worlds meet and blend. Step deeper in, and the character of the woodland changes. The canopy closes overhead, that ceiling of leaves and branches created by the tallest trees reaching for sunlight. In a mature forest, this canopy might filter out more than 90% of the sunlight, casting the forest floor in perpetual dappled shade. The air feels different here, cooler, moister, rich with the scent of decomposition and growth. Sounds are both dampened and amplified. A fallen twig might snap loudly underfoot while distant noises are absorbed by the surrounding vegetation. The forest is not a single environment, but many stacked together in layers. Above the canopy, emergent trees might rise even higher, their crowns standing alone in the full sun. Below the main canopy comes the understory, a middle layer of younger trees and shade-tolerant species waiting for their chance to reach higher. Then the shrub layer, where woody plants adapted to deep shade spread their leaves horizontally to capture what light filters down. At the forest floor, herbaceous plants, mosses, and fungi make use of the brief periods when seasonal changes allow more light to reach them. And below it all, hidden from our eyes, spreads the most extensive part of the forest, the root zone, where the true connections of the woodland exist. Here, in the soil, tree roots reach outward and downward, not in isolation but in constant interaction with billions of other organisms. A single handful of rich forest soil contains more living organisms than there are humans on Earth: bacteria, fungi, nematodes, arthropods, and countless other life forms participating in the complex economy of decomposition and nutrient cycling. Most remarkable of all is what scientists call the Wood Wide Web, the network of mycorrhizal fungi that connect trees to one another underground. These fungi form symbiotic relationships with tree roots, extending the tree's reach and ability to absorb nutrients. In exchange for sugars produced by the tree through photosynthesis, the fungi provide minerals and water they gather from the soil. But these fungi do more than feed individual trees. They connect them, creating pathways through which trees can share resources and even information. Through this fungal network, a mature tree might send carbon to a young sapling growing in deep shade. When one tree is attacked by insects, it can release chemical warning signals that travel through these underground connections to other trees, allowing them to increase their defensive compounds before the insects reach them. Some scientists have called this the nervous system of the forest, a living network that allows for communication and mutual aid between trees that once appeared to be standing in silent isolation. The forest never truly sleeps, though its rhythms change with day and night, with seasons, with years. As darkness falls, different forest creatures emerge. Owls take flight on silent wings, their specialized feathers allowing them to swoop unheard toward unsuspecting prey. Bats navigate by echolocation, sending out high-frequency calls and creating detailed acoustic maps of their surroundings from the returning echoes. On the forest floor, rodents rustle through leaf litter, while larger mammals, deer, foxes, bears, move with surprising quiet through familiar territories. In temperate forests, the changing seasons bring dramatic transformations. As autumn approaches, deciduous trees begin the careful process of withdrawing nutrients from their leaves. The green chlorophyll breaks down, revealing the yellows, oranges, and reds of other pigments that were present all along but masked by the dominant green. This isn't simply a passive dying, it's an orchestrated process of conservation. Trees actively reabsorb valuable nutrients from their leaves before discarding them, storing proteins and other compounds in their woody tissues to use when spring returns. The fallen leaves themselves become a new habitat, a layer of insulation and nourishment covering the forest floor. Here, an entire ecosystem of decomposers gets to work, from large invertebrates that shred the leaves into smaller pieces to microscopic bacteria that break down the tough cell walls of plant matter. Through their combined efforts, the complex molecules of dead leaves are transformed back into simple nutrients that tree roots can once again absorb, a perfect cycle of use and reuse. Winter in a deciduous forest might seem like a time of death, but it is merely a period of rest. The bare branches of trees are not signs of perishing but of prudence, an adaptation to conserve water during a time when frozen soil makes it difficult to replace what might be lost through leaf surfaces. Deep inside each twig, protected by specialized scales, leaf buds already hold the tightly folded beginnings of next spring's foliage, a promise waiting to be fulfilled when conditions improve. Coniferous forests follow different rhythms. Their needle-like leaves, coated with thick, waxy cuticles to prevent water loss, can remain functional through winter's freeze. In the boreal forests that stretch across Canada, Russia, and Scandinavia, evergreen conifers maintain their photosynthetic surfaces year-round, ready to capture energy during the brief periods of winter sunlight. The trade-off comes in the form of reduced efficiency. Conifer needles photosynthesize more slowly than broadleaves, but they can operate across a wider range of conditions. The boreal forest, also known as taiga, forms the largest continuous woodland on our planet, a green band circling the northern hemisphere just below the Arctic. Here, winter temperatures may plunge to 40 degrees below zero, and the growing season might last only 3 months. Yet life persists and even thrives, adapted to these harsh conditions through specialization. The black spruce can reproduce even after forest fires, its cones sealed with resin that melts in the heat, releasing seeds onto the newly cleared, nutrient-rich ash. Moving toward the equator, forests transform again. In tropical rainforests, where temperatures remain warm and rainfall abundant year-round, there is no dormant season. Growth continues constantly, and the struggle for light becomes the defining challenge. Trees race upward, investing less in thick trunks and more in rapid height gain, supporting themselves partly through buttress roots that spread outward at the base like flying buttresses on a cathedral. A single acre of rainforest may contain more than 200 different tree species, a diversity unimaginable in northern woods. This incredible diversity extends to all forms of life in the rainforest. A single tree in the Amazon may host more than 40 different ant species, more than the total ant species in all of Britain. The canopy itself forms a separate world, seldom explored until recently, where unique plants grow perched on branches never touching the ground. Orchids, bromeliads, and other epiphytes create suspended gardens high above the forest floor, their roots exposed to the air, gathering moisture from rainfall and nutrients from decomposing matter that collect in tree crotches. Between these extremes, the austere boreal woods and the riotous tropical forests, lie the temperate woodlands that once covered much of Europe, eastern North America, and parts of Asia. These forests occupy the middle ground in many ways, moderate in temperature, moderate in diversity, moderate in growth rate. Their deciduous nature, with the dramatic cycle of leaf growth and shedding, created distinct seasonal habitats that supported waves of life through the year: spring ephemeral wildflowers that bloom before the canopy leaves out, summer insects that feed on mature leaves, autumn fungi that flourish among the falling debris. Each forest type developed its own assembly of animal life, from the jaguars and tapirs of tropical American forests to the wolves and moose of the northern boreal woods. Birds especially diversified to fill forest niches, from ground-dwelling species that rarely fly to canopy specialists that may never descend to Earth during their adult lives. In the forests of New Guinea, birds of paradise evolved elaborate plumage and complex courtship displays, made possible by the abundance and security of their forest home. In tropical America, mixed flocks of insect-eating birds move through the forest together, different species cooperating to flush prey and warn of predators. The relationships between forests and animals go beyond simple habitation. Many forest trees depend entirely on animals for their reproduction. In temperate woodlands, jays and squirrels gather and bury acorns, forgetting many of their caches and inadvertently planting oak forests for future generations. In tropical forests, large fruit-eating animals consume fruits and deposit the seeds far from the parent tree, embedded in a perfect packet of fertilizer. The extinction of these animals, from large toucans to forest elephants, threatens the regeneration of the trees that depend on them. Perhaps nowhere is the intricate dance between forests and animals more apparent than in the story of fig trees and their pollinators. Each of the world's more than 700 fig species is pollinated by a specific species of fig wasp, which in turn can breed nowhere else but in the flowers of its particular fig. The female wasp enters the fig through a tiny opening, losing her wings in the process and sacrificing her ability to ever leave. Inside, she pollinates the flowers and lays her eggs. Her offspring develop within the fig, and when mature, the males mate with females, then chew escape tunnels through the fig's flesh. The males die without ever leaving the fig, while the newly fertilized females, carrying pollen from their birthplace, fly off to find another fig tree of the same species, continuing the cycle. This level of specialization, this mutual dependency, is not exceptional in forests, but typical. The wood wide web of mycorrhizal fungi mentioned earlier represents thousands of partnerships between specific fungi and specific trees. Certain orchids require particular bee species with exactly the right body size to pollinate them. Some butterfly species can only lay their eggs on a single species of forest plant, their caterpillars having evolved to detoxify that specific plant's chemical defenses. Forests also shape the very ground on which they stand. Their leaf litter slowly transforms into humus, the dark, rich organic component of soil that retains moisture and nutrients. Their roots break apart bedrock, accelerating the weathering of minerals. In the process, they help create the soil that will support future generations of trees. When slopes are stripped of forest cover, the soil often follows, washing away in heavy rains. A mature forest, by contrast, can lose less than 2% of rainfall to runoff. The precipitation slowed first by the canopy, then by understory plants, then absorbed by the sponge-like forest floor. This capacity to capture and slowly release water makes forests crucial regulators of the water cycle. They act as living reservoirs, reducing flooding during heavy rainfall and sustaining stream flow during drier periods. The Amazon rainforest generates much of its own rainfall through transpiration, the release of water vapor from leaf surfaces. So much moisture rises from the Amazon's trees that it forms flying rivers, bands of atmospheric humidity that carry rainfall to distant regions. When large areas of forest are cleared, these patterns of moisture transport can collapse, potentially transforming once wet regions into drier landscapes less capable of supporting forests. As you drift closer to sleep, picture the life of a single tree growing in a forest. From a seed no larger than your fingernail, it emerges as a tender seedling, its first leaves unfurling to catch the dappled sunlight that reaches the forest floor. If fortunate enough to grow in a gap where a mature tree has fallen, it may shoot upward rapidly, raising other saplings for the precious commodity of light. In the understory of a mature forest, a young tree might grow with painful slowness, adding perhaps an inch of height each year, biding its time in the shade until an opening appears above. For decades, even centuries, the tree grows, adding annual rings of wood, extending its root system, pushing its crown higher into the canopy. If it reaches maturity, it becomes a world unto itself. Its bark develops fissures and crevices that shelter insects and spiders. Birds nest among its branches. Fungi establish themselves in pockets of decay, not necessarily harming the tree but recycling small areas of dead wood while the greater whole lives on. Lichens, those curious partnerships between fungi and algae, colonize its branches, extracting no nutrition from the tree but using it as a platform on which to capture sunlight and moisture from the air. A mature tree in a forest does not exist in isolation but as part of a community. Through that underground network of mycorrhizal fungi, it may be connected to hundreds of other trees, not just its own species, but others as well. Resources flow through this network, often from larger, more established trees to smaller ones growing in less favorable conditions. Some researchers have even observed that dying trees appear to send carbon reserves through the mycorrhizal network to neighboring trees, a final gift to the community before their own lives end. When at last a forest giant falls, perhaps toppled by wind, struck by lightning, or simply succumbing to age, its contribution to the forest doesn't end. As a fallen log, it enters a new phase of usefulness, called nurse log status. The decaying wood becomes a seed bed for new trees, a reservoir of moisture in dry times, and habitat for countless decomposer organisms. A single rotting log may contain more life than the living tree ever did, from colorful fungi fruiting on its surface to tunneling beetles, from nesting birds in its hollow spaces to salamanders sheltering in the cool dampness beneath. In many forests, especially in the Pacific Northwest of North America, you can observe entire rows of mature trees growing in straight lines, not planted by humans, but having germinated on the remains of a fallen giant long since dissolved back into the soil. Only the lineup of trees remains as testament to the nurse log that gave them their start. In this way, forests maintain their own continuity, each generation literally growing from the remains of the last. The concept of a forest as a community extends beyond the trees to include all the living beings within it. Ecologists sometimes use the term forest not to describe a collection of trees, but an entire ecosystem characterized by tree cover. This broader definition encompasses the shrubs and herbs, the insects and birds, the fungi and bacteria, the mammals and reptiles, all the interconnected lives that depend on and contribute to the woodland environment. Within this forest community, every species plays a role, sometimes several. Woodpeckers, for example, are not merely birds that eat insects. When they excavate nesting cavities in trees, they create homes that will later be used by dozens of other forest species unable to create their own tree hollows. Beavers are more than large rodents. They're ecosystem engineers whose dams create wetlands within forests, diversifying habitats and influencing everything from water flow to soil composition. Even seeming pests like bark beetles serve a purpose, targeting weakened trees and accelerating the recycling of their nutrients. The relationships within a forest can be categorized in various ways: predator and prey, parasite and host, pollinator and flower, seed disperser and fruit. But increasingly, ecologists recognize that these categories oversimplify the complex and often changing relationships between species. Many interactions that appear harmful in the short term may benefit the community over time. The mountain pine beetle, for instance, has killed millions of trees across western North America, yet the outbreaks create canopy openings and release nutrients, potentially increasing forest resilience and diversity over the longer term. Perhaps the most profound way to understand a forest is not as a collection of separate organisms, but as a network of relationships, a system where the connections between components matter as much as the components themselves. This perspective reveals forests as dynamic, constantly changing communities rather than static assemblages of trees and other species. A forest is not so much a place as a process, a flowing, adapting, responding entity that reacts to changes both within and beyond its boundaries. Forests respond to change on multiple timescales. In the short term, minutes to hours, leaves track the sun, stomata open and close, and animals move through different microhabitats. Over seasons, deciduous trees leaf out and shed, animals migrate or hibernate, and patterns of growth and dormancy follow the rhythm of temperature and rainfall. Across years and decades, trees mature, canopy gaps form and close, and the composition of species shifts gradually. On the scale of centuries and millennia, entire forest types advance and retreat with changing climates, evolving new relationships and adaptations. This capacity for change makes forests remarkably resilient. After disturbances like fires, storms, or insect outbreaks, forests typically recover not always to their previous state, but to a functional woodland adapted to new conditions. Following a major wildfire, for example, a forest might progress through several stages, first colonized by grasses and fire-adapted shrubs, then by fast-growing pioneer tree species like aspen or birch, and eventually, over decades or centuries, returning to dominance by longer-lived conifers or hardwoods. The ability of forests to recover from disturbance depends partly on what ecologists call biological legacies, elements of the previous forest that survive and facilitate regrowth. These might include living trees that escaped the disturbance, seeds stored in the soil, roots that can resprout, or the mycorrhizal network that persists below ground even when the trees above have been removed. When a forest retains sufficient biological legacies, its recovery can be surprisingly rapid. When these legacies are destroyed by particularly intense fires, repeated disturbances, or human activities like clearing and plowing, recovery becomes slower and less certain. As you continue to relax, consider the sensory experience of a forest, not just how it looks, but how it feels, smells, sounds, and even tastes. Forests engage all our senses in ways that a few other environments can match. Visually, they offer both intricate detail and grand scale, from the delicate venation of a single leaf to the soaring columns of trunks stretching to the horizon. The play of light through the canopy creates an ever-changing patchwork of brightness and shadow, with beams of sunlight appearing almost solid as they pierce through openings in the leaf cover. The soundscape of a forest has its own distinctive character. Wind moves differently through trees than through open land, creating a gentle rushing or sighing sound uniquely associated with woodlands. This background forms a canvas for more specific forest voices, the territorial songs of birds, the rhythmic tapping of woodpeckers, the rustle of creatures moving through underbrush. Some forests have their own acoustic signatures. In bamboo forests, hollow stems knock against each other in the wind, creating percussive music found nowhere else on Earth. The scent of a forest varies with the season, the weather, and the dominant tree species. Conifer forests release aromatic terpenes, compounds that give pine, spruce, and fir their distinctive fragrance. These chemicals, which help protect the trees from insects and microbes, have been shown to affect human physiology as well, potentially reducing stress and enhancing immune function when we breathe forest air. In Japan, the practice of Shinrin Yoku, or forest bathing, has developed around the therapeutic inhalation of these woodland compounds. The air in a forest feels different against the skin, typically cooler and moister than in surrounding open areas. The temperature gradient between forest interior and edge can be substantial, with mature woodlands maintaining their own microclimate. This cooling effect becomes particularly noticeable on hot summer days, when the shade and transpiration from countless leaves can make a forest interior feel 10 or 15 degrees cooler than nearby clearings. The forest floor has its own tactile character, springy with accumulated organic matter, occasionally interrupted by the solid presence of exposed roots or stones. Even taste connects us to forests, though less directly than our other senses. Wild berries, nuts, and fungi offer distinctive flavors that have shaped human cuisine wherever people live near woodlands. The earthy sweetness of maple syrup comes from concentrated tree sap, processed by human hands but originating in the silent winter chemistry of the sugar maple. Game animals that feed on forest vegetation carry the flavors of the woodland in their flesh, creating what ecologists call a trophic cascade of forest taste from plant to herbivore to human. Our relationship with forests has always been complex, a mixture of dependence and caution, reverence and fear. For most of human history, forests provided essential resources, food, fuel, building materials, medicines, while also harboring dangers from predators to the simple but serious risk of becoming lost among the trees. This duality shaped early human attitudes toward the woodlands, which appear in mythology and folklore as places of both peril and possibility, testing grounds where heroes faced trials and returned transformed. The ancient Greeks consecrated particular groves to their gods, forbidding cutting or hunting within these sacred precincts. In Japan, old Shinto beliefs recognized spirits dwelling in impressive trees, which were marked with sacred ropes and paper streamers. Celtic druids performed rituals in oak groves, while various Germanic peoples revered the mysterious depths of their forests as places where the boundaries between worlds grew thin. Across cultures, trees and forests have served as symbols of life, growth, connection, and regeneration. As human civilizations developed, our relationship with forests changed. Woodlands were increasingly viewed as resources to be managed or obstacles to be removed. The word forestry itself comes from the Latin fores, meaning outside. Forests were the wild lands outside settlement, gradually brought under human control. In Europe, by the Middle Ages, royal forests were established as hunting preserves for nobility, with strict laws governing who could use forest resources and how. The science of forestry emerged in the 18th century, particularly in Germany, where concerns about timber shortages led to systematic approaches to woodland management. These early foresters developed the concept of sustained yield, harvesting trees at a rate that could be maintained indefinitely. While groundbreaking for its time, this approach often simplified forests into timber factories, replacing diverse natural woodlands with orderly plantations of single species, usually conifers, chosen for their straight growth and commercial value. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, vast areas of original forest were converted to other uses or replaced with simplified tree plantations. Temperate deciduous forests in Europe and eastern North America were cleared for agriculture. Tropical rainforests in South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia were, and continue to be, removed for timber, cattle ranching, and crop production. The boreal forests of the north have been harvested extensively for paper production and, increasingly, biomass energy. Yet alongside this utilitarian approach to forests, a counter-movement has always existed. People who valued woodlands for reasons beyond their material resources. In the United States, early conservationists like John Muir advocated for the protection of forests for their beauty, spiritual value, and importance to wildlife. Romantic poets and painters celebrated the wild aesthetic of untamed woods. Indigenous peoples around the world continue their traditional forest management practices, often working to protect woodlands as cultural landscapes integral to their ways of life. Today, our understanding of forests continues to evolve, informed by advances in ecology, climate science, and even social psychology. We now recognize forests not just as collections of trees, but as complex systems providing what ecologists call ecosystem services. Benefits like carbon sequestration, water purification, soil protection, and biodiversity conservation. These services, once taken for granted, are increasingly valued as we confront environmental challenges like climate change, species extinctions, and watershed degradation. The carbon storing capacity of forests has received particular attention as we seek ways to mitigate climate change. Trees absorb carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, incorporating the carbon into their wood, leaves, and roots. A mature forest can store hundreds of tons of carbon per acre, much of it remaining sequestered for decades or centuries in woody tissues. When forests are cleared and burned, this stored carbon returns to the atmosphere, contributing to the greenhouse effect. Protecting existing forests and restoring degraded woodlands have thus become important strategies in addressing global climate challenges. Forests also play crucial roles in the water cycle, especially in mountainous regions where they capture precipitation, reduce erosion, and regulate the flow of water to lowland areas. The sponge effect of forest soils, with their high organic content and fungal networks, helps prevent flooding during heavy rains while maintaining stream flow during drier periods. In many watersheds, the quality and quantity of water available for human use depend directly on the health of upland forests, a connection recognized in cities from New York to Quito, which have invested in forest protection as a cost-effective way to secure their water supplies. As human populations have grown and expanded, forests have receded. Today, about 30% of Earth's land surface remains forested, down from perhaps twice that before human civilizations began their spread. The remaining woodlands face numerous threats, from direct clearing for agriculture and development to more subtle pressures like air pollution, invasive species, and climate change. In some regions, forests are beginning to show signs of stress from conditions they haven't experienced in thousands or millions of years. Yet there are also reasons for hope. In parts of Europe and North America, forests are actually expanding as marginal agricultural land reverts to woodland. Improved forestry practices in many countries now emphasize ecological health alongside timber production. Protected area networks have grown substantially, though they still cover only a fraction of the world's forests. Perhaps most encouragingly, our scientific understanding of forest ecology has advanced tremendously, offering insights that can guide better stewardship. As you drift toward sleep, imagine the forest at night, that time when human visitors typically depart and the woodland shifts to different rhythms. Darkness transforms the forest. Sounds become more prominent as vision recedes in importance. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of a night bird, the occasional snap of a twig under unseen weight, these frame the nocturnal forest experience. Some plants, like evening primrose or night-blooming jasmine, release their fragrance only after sunset, attracting night-flying pollinators like moths with their sweet scents. The forest canopy at night becomes a highway for creatures rarely seen by day. Flying squirrels glide silently between trees, their specialized membranes stretching between limbs to create living parachutes. Owls move on soundless wings, their specialized feathers eliminating the noise that would warn potential prey. Bats navigate by echolocation, their high-pitched calls inaudible to human ears, but forming detailed acoustic images that allow them to snatch insects from mid-air or pluck fruit from branches in complete darkness. On the forest floor, a different set of actors takes center stage after dark. Mice and voles, shrews and rabbits emerge to feed, alert for predators but drawn by the relative safety that darkness provides from diurnal hunters. Larger mammals like deer become more active, browsing on vegetation with greater confidence than during daylight hours. Foxes and coyotes begin their hunting, moving with practiced silence through familiar territories. In tropical forests, the night shift might include slow lorises, civets, and secretive cats like the margay, which can climb down trees head first thanks to uniquely flexible ankle joints. Even plants respond to the cycle of day and night. Their leaves may change position, usually folding or drooping slightly, to conserve energy and reduce water loss when photosynthesis is impossible. This movement, called nyctinasty, can be subtle or dramatic depending on the species. The leaves of many legumes fold together at dusk, while some trees in the bean family may fold all their leaflets along the midrib, transforming their appearance entirely between a day and night states. The darkness of a forest at night serves as a reminder of how recently, in evolutionary terms, humans have become mainly diurnal creatures. Our distant ancestors likely lived in fear of the night forest, with its hidden predators and limited visibility. Even today, many people experience an instinctive wariness in dark woodlands, an ancient caution programmed into our species through countless generations of learning that nighttime in nature requires heightened awareness. Yet the night forest is not primarily a place of danger, but simply another setting for the continuous drama of life, with its own specialized players and adaptations. As the night progresses, the forest moves through cycles of activity and rest. Some creatures are most active at dusk and dawn, the crepuscular species like deer and many songbirds. Others operate throughout the night, while still others emerge only during particular hours of darkness. The eastern whippoorwill, for instance, sings most actively on moonlit nights, falling silent when clouds cover the moon, as if following celestial cues invisible to us. In the deepest hours of night, when even nocturnal creatures may pause their activities, the forest achieves a profound quiet, broken only by the background sounds of moving air and water. In this stillness, trees continue their silent work, transporting water up from roots to leaves, moving sugars from photosynthetic tissues to growing or storage areas, maintaining the countless chemical reactions that constitute plant life. The forest never truly sleeps, though its pulse is slow with darkness, just as your own body now prepares for rest. Dawn brings another transition, announced first by birdsong. The chorus typically begins with just one or two early risers in North American forests, forests, often the robin or the song sparrow, joined gradually by other species until the woodland resonates with overlapping melodies. This dawn chorus serves multiple purposes. Male birds announce their territories and attract mates, while the collective sound of many birds calling indicates to all forest creatures that no predator is actively hunting nearby. A morning all-clear signal shared across species. As light strengthens, diurnal animals become active while nocturnal ones retreat to their daytime refuges. Flowers that closed for the night unfold their petals once more. Dew that condensed on leaves during the cool hours begins to evaporate, creating a brief period of heightened humidity in the forest air. The woodland day begins, another cycle in the continuous, rhythmic life of one of Earth's most complex and beautiful ecosystems. In your mind's eye, picture a single leaf high in the forest canopy. Sunlight strikes its surface, triggering the quiet miracle of photosynthesis. Water drawn from deep in the soil combines with carbon dioxide from the air energized by sunlight captured by chlorophyll. Oxygen is released as a byproduct, a gift to the breathing world, while carbon molecules link together into sugars that fuel the tree's growth and activities. This simple leaf, one of countless millions in the forest, helps drive the cycles of energy and matter that sustain not just the woodland but all life on Earth. The leaf will eventually fall, adding its substance to the forest floor. There, decomposers will break it down, returning its minerals to the soil and its carbon to the air, unless some portion becomes incorporated into more stable forms of soil organic matter, storing that carbon for decades or centuries. In this way, each leaf participates in cycles both brief and extended, its atoms moving from air to tree to soil and back again in the great circular economy of the forest. As you continue to relax, let your thoughts drift with these forest cycles, the movement of water from soil to leaf to air, the flow of carbon from atmosphere to wood to soil, the transfer of energy from sunlight to plant to animal. In their quiet, continuous operation, these cycles create stability, not a static, unchanging state, but a dynamic balance that allows the forest to persist through time while constantly renewing itself. Human sleep itself is a kind of forest cycle, a period of rest and renewal, of processing and consolidation. As your consciousness begins to settle, imagine that you are part of these ancient rhythms too, breathing with the trees, your body following patterns established long before our species walked beneath forest canopies. The relationship between forests and humans extends deep into our evolutionary past. Our primate ancestors lived in trees, their hands adapted for grasping branches, their vision optimized for judging distances between swaying perches. When early hominids descended to the ground, they didn't leave the forest entirely but lived at its edges in the mosaic landscapes where woodland meets grassland. These transitional zones offered both the protective cover of trees and the expanded foraging opportunities of open country, perhaps helping to shape our species' remarkable adaptability. Archaeological evidence suggests that for most of human history, our species maintained intimate knowledge of forest environments. Hunter-gatherers understood which trees produced edible fruits, nuts, and sap, which barks and leaves contained medicinal compounds, which woods burned hottest or made the most resilient tools. This wasn't simply information but a relationship. a way of being embedded in the woodland community as participants rather than mere observers. Indigenous peoples worldwide developed sophisticated systems for living with the forest sustainably. The Amazon rainforest, long portrayed as pristine wilderness, bears the subtle imprints of millennia of human management. Native Amazonians enriched the soil in patches, creating fertile dark earth that remains productive centuries later. They favored certain tree species over others, gradually shifting the composition of the forest to increase useful plants without clearing the woodland entirely. Far from destroying the rainforest, they enhanced its diversity while drawing sustenance from it, a model of integration rather than exploitation. In North America, many indigenous nations regularly used controlled burning to maintain forest health and structure. Low-intensity fires cleared underbrush, recycled nutrients, reduced the risk of catastrophic wildfires, and created habitat mosaics supporting diverse wildlife. When European colonizers prevented these traditional burning practices, they unwittingly disrupted forest systems that had been carefully managed for generations. The catastrophic wildfires that plague many Western forests today partly reflect this interruption of indigenous stewardship. The forest has served as more than a material resource for human communities. It has also been a spiritual reservoir, a place where the mundane and the mystical meet. In many cultural traditions, forests represent the threshold between the known and unknown, the ordered and the wild. Fairy tales across cultures locate their transformative adventures within woods, where protagonists become lost before finding their true selves. From the ancient Europeans who left offerings at sacred groves to contemporary hikers who speak of forests as cathedrals, humans have consistently recognized something profound in the quiet depths among trees. This recognition persists even in our increasingly urban world. Studies in environmental psychology have documented the restorative effects of time spent among trees, reduced stress hormones, lowered blood pressure, improved mood, and enhanced concentration. In Japan, this research has given scientific validation to the practice of Shinrin-yoku or forest bathing, now prescribed by doctors as a treatment for various stress-related ailments. The concept has spread globally, with forest therapy guides leading urban dwellers into woodland settings for slow mindful immersion in the multisensory forest experience. What makes forests so effective at restoring human well-being? Researchers suggest several mechanisms. The phytoncides, antimicrobial volatile compounds released by trees, may boost immune function when inhaled. The predominance of fractal patterns in forest visuals, the self-similar branching structures that appear from the scale of tiny ferns to entire tree crowns, seems to engage our visual processing in ways that reduce mental fatigue. The soundscape of a forest, with its random but gentle stimuli, provides what neuroscientists call soft fascination, enough novelty to hold attention without demanding the exhausting focus required by urban environments. But beyond these measurable effects lies something more difficult to quantify, a sense of connection to processes larger and older than our individual lives. In forests, we encounter timescales that dwarf human experience. The ancient redwoods of California have stood for 2,000 years or more, their uppermost branches hosting soil and plant communities that never touch the ground. The quaking aspen groves of western North America, where what appears to be a forest of separate trees is actually a single organism connected by a common root system, may have persisted for tens of thousands of years, making them among the oldest living things on Earth. These ancient beings follow rhythms difficult for humans to perceive. The bristlecone pines of the American Southwest grow so slowly in their harsh, high-altitude environments that a century might add only a few inches to their twisted trunks. Their needles, remarkably efficient in their use of resources, can remain functional for 30 years or more before being replaced. Walking among them is to enter a different temporal world, where our human urgency seems suddenly out of place, a humbling but strangely comforting realization. Even younger forests operate on timescales that encourage perspective. The life of an oak or maple, several human generations long, offers a kind of continuity increasingly rare in our rapidly changing world. When we plant a tree whose shade we may never sit under, we participate in a form of care that extends beyond our individual lives, a gesture of hope and connection to future generations who will walk the earth when we are gone. The diversity of forest types across our planet reflects the remarkable adaptability of trees to different conditions. Tropical rainforests, with their year-round warmth and abundant moisture, produce the most structurally complex forests on Earth. Their canopies form multiple distinct layers, and a single acre may contain more tree species than exist in all of North America. Because nutrients in these ecosystems are typically bound up in living tissues rather than in the soil, rainforest trees have developed remarkable adaptations for capturing and conserving resources, from the buttress roots that stabilize tall trunks in shallow soils to the waxy leaf surfaces that shed excess rainfall. Moving away from the equator, we encounter seasonal tropical forests, where distinct wet and dry periods create different challenges and opportunities. Many trees in these forests shed their leaves during the dry season, not in response to cold, as in temperate deciduous forests, but to conserve water when rainfall is scarce. The timing of leaf drop and flowering often occurs with remarkable synchronicity across entire forest communities, triggered by subtle environmental cues like minor changes in day length or the first rains after a dry period. Mediterranean forests and woodlands, adapted to hot, dry summers and mild, wet winters, have evolved distinctive strategies for enduring seasonal drought. Many have developed sclerophyllous leaves, small, tough, and often waxy or hairy to reduce water loss. Cork oak, native to the Mediterranean basin, produces thick, fire-resistant bark that humans have harvested for millennia without killing the trees. The iconic stone pines of Italy, with their umbrella-shaped crowns, create patches of shade in which more moisture-loving plants can survive the summer heat. Temperate deciduous forests, dominant across much of Europe, eastern North America, and eastern Asia, showcase some of the most dramatic seasonal changes on Earth. Their spring leaf-out transforms the woodland from skeletal gray to luminous green in a matter of weeks. Their autumn-colored displays, particularly renowned in New England and Japan, attract admirers from around the world. The timing of these changes varies not only by latitude and elevation, but also by individual tree species, creating a choreographed progression both in spring, when different trees leaf out in sequence, and in fall when they display distinct colors. from the bright yellows of birch and aspen to the deep burgundies of dogwood and sweet gum. The temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest, New Zealand, and parts of Chile receive enormous amounts of rainfall, creating forests of exceptional biomass, the total weight of living material per acre. In North America's Olympic Peninsula, massive western hemlocks, Douglas firs, and western red cedars create a cathedral-like atmosphere, their trunks and branches draped with mosses and lichens. The forest floor, cushioned with deep accumulations of organic matter, supports a lush understory of ferns and shade-tolerant shrubs. These forests capture water not just from rainfall but from fog, their foliage condensing atmospheric moisture that drips to the soil below. Boreal forests, also called taiga, form a vast belt across northern Eurasia and North America, constituting the largest terrestrial biome on Earth. Dominated by conifers adapted to harsh winters and short growing seasons, these forests appear relatively simple compared to tropical or temperate woodlands. Yet they store enormous amounts of carbon, both in their trees and in the deep organic soils beneath them. Their seasonal transitions are swift and dramatic, the brief summer bringing an explosion of growth and activity before the long winter returns. At the highest elevations where trees can still survive, subalpine forests occupy the zone between closed woodland and the treeless alpine meadows. Here, trees often grow in stunted, wind-sculpted forms, their trunks thickened and branches flagged in the direction of prevailing winds. In many mountains, the upper tree line forms a remarkably clear boundary, above which the growing season is too short or the conditions too harsh for trees to survive. This boundary shifts over time with the changing climate, a visible record of environmental change written across mountain slopes. Mangrove forests occupy the intertidal zones of tropical and subtropical coastlines, where few other trees can survive. Their specialized roots, either arching prop roots or vertical pneumatophores that rise from the mud-like snorkels, allow them to breed in oxygen-poor soils. Salt-filtering mechanisms in their tissues extract fresh water from seawater, a botanical feat that enables them to thrive where most plants would perish. Mangroves protect coastlines from erosion and storm damage, shelter enormous numbers of marine creatures in their tangled root systems, and sequester more carbon per acre than almost any other forest type. Cloud forests develop where consistent condensation creates a perpetual mist, typically on mountainsides where moisture-laden air is forced upward and cooled. These forests capture water directly from clouds, with their trees, shrubs, and epiphytes serving as living water collectors. The constant moisture supports extraordinary diversities of mosses, ferns, orchids, and other plants that grow not just on the ground but on every available surface: tree trunks, branches, even leaves. Walking through a cloud forest is to enter a world draped in green, where boundaries between different organisms blur in the omnipresent moisture. Dry forests and woodlands cover significant portions of Africa, Australia, and the tropical Americas, occupying regions with pronounced dry seasons. These are not deserts but genuine forests, though their trees often stand farther apart than in wetter woodlands. Many species in these ecosystems have developed thick, water-storing tissues or deep root systems to survive seasonal drought. The baobab trees of African savannas, with their massive swollen trunks, store thousands of gallons of water to endure the dry season. The thorny acacias that dot many semi-arid landscapes protect their precious leaves with sharp defenses against browsing animals. These diverse forest types share common principles of organization despite their differences. All forests create their own internal climate, moderating temperature extremes and maintaining higher humidity than surrounding open areas. All develop vertical structure, with different species adapted to the varying light conditions from forest floor to canopy. All cycle nutrients through complex networks of producers, consumers, and decomposers, and all respond dynamically to change, whether from natural disturbances like storms and fires or from human activities like logging and agriculture. The patterns of these forests, their distribution across continents, their internal arrangements of species, their seasonal rhythms, reflect both present conditions and historical factors. Today's forests bear the imprint of ice ages that ended thousands of years ago, when vast sheets of ice pushed woodlands southward and separated once continuous forest regions into isolated patches. As the ice retreated, trees migrated back northward, but not all at the same rate or along the same routes. The current composition of many northern forests still reflects this history of retreat and return, with some species not yet having reached the full extent of their potential range. Human history has left equally profound marks on today's forests. In Europe, virtually no primary forest remains. Almost every woodland has been cut, regrown, and managed over centuries or millennia of human settlement. In eastern North America, forests that were extensively cleared for agriculture in the 18th and 19th centuries have regrown following farm abandonment, but their composition often differs from pre-settlement woodlands. In the tropics, ancient civilizations altered the forests in ways we are only beginning to recognize, favoring useful species and sometimes enriching soils in ways that still influence forest composition centuries after these societies collapsed. This intertwining of natural and human history reminds us that forests are not static entities but dynamic systems that respond to and record change. The scientific discipline of dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, makes this recording function literal. Each year's growth leaves a visible layer in the wood of most trees in seasonal climates. The width of these rings reflects growing conditions, wider in favorable years, narrower during droughts or after disturbances like insect outbreaks. By analyzing ring patterns in living trees and preserved wood, scientists can reconstruct climate conditions and disturbance histories stretching back thousands of years. Trees preserve other records as well. Isotopes in their tissues reflect atmospheric conditions during growth. Scars in their bark document fires and other traumas. Shifts in forest composition captured in pollen, preserved in lake sediments, tell stories of changing climate and human activity across millennia. Through these records, forests serve as archives of environmental change, holding information about past conditions that helps us understand our present and anticipate our future. The future of forests themselves, however, remains uncertain in many regions. Climate change is altering the conditions to which local tree species are adapted, warming temperatures, shifting precipitation patterns, and increasing the frequency of extreme events like droughts, fires, and intense storms. Trees, with their long lifespans and limited mobility, they can only move through a seed dispersal across generations, may struggle to adapt quickly enough to these rapidly changing conditions. Already, signs of forest stress are visible in many regions. In western North America, warming temperatures and drought have contributed to massive outbreaks of bark beetles that have killed millions of acres of conifers. In the Amazon, areas that experience deforestation and fragmentation become more vulnerable to fire, creating potential feedback loops that could convert rainforest to savanna. Along coastlines, rising sea levels push salt water into freshwater forests, killing trees not adapted to salinity and potentially transforming forested wetlands to open marsh. Yet forests also offer one of our most powerful tools for addressing climate change. Growing trees capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, converting it to wood and soil organic matter that can remain sequestered for decades or centuries. Reforestation of previously cleared land and improved management of existing forests could potentially offset a significant portion of current carbon emissions while providing additional benefits for biodiversity, water quality, and human well-being. These dual roles, forests as both vulnerable to climate change and potential mitigators of it, highlight the complexity of our relationship with the woodlands in the 21st century. How we manage, protect, and restore forests in coming decades will influence not just the future of these ecosystems, but the future of our climate, our water resources, and countless species, including our own. The good news is that forests possess remarkable resilience. Given appropriate conditions and sufficient time, they have demonstrated the capacity to recover from severe disturbances, to adapt to changing conditions, and to recolonize areas from which they were previously eliminated. In the eastern United States, forests have reclaimed millions of acres of abandoned farmland over the past century. In Costa Rica, areas of intensive cattle ranching have transformed back to closed canopy forest in just a few decades after agricultural abandonment. Even in regions severely impacted by industrial pollution like parts of Central Europe, forests have shown surprising ability to recover once pollution sources were controlled. This resilience has limits, however. When forests face multiple stressors simultaneously, such as fragmentation, invasive species, pollution, and climate change, their capacity for self-renewal may be overwhelmed. When key components of the system are lost, particularly large predators or important seed dispersers, forest dynamics may change in ways that prevent a return to previous states. When soil is severely degraded through erosion or contamination, the foundation for a forest regrowth may be compromised for generations. Understanding these thresholds, the points beyond which forest resilience breaks down, has become an important focus of ecological research. Scientists seek to identify early warning signs of forest stress and to determine which interventions might be most effective at different stages of degradation. In some cases, simply removing a stressor, like uncontrolled grazing or excessive logging, may be sufficient to allow natural recovery. In others, active restoration efforts may be necessary, from replanting native trees to reintroducing key animal species to recontouring eroded landscapes. As evening deepens into night, imagine yourself walking along a forest path. The day's heat dissipates, and the first evening coolness settles among the trees. This is the time between times, when diurnal creatures prepare for rest and nocturnal ones begin to stir. The quality of light changes moment by moment as the sun dips below the horizon, first golden, then deep blue, finally fading to the silver gray of starlight and possibly moonlight filtering through branches. In this transitional hour, the forest offers particular gifts to the attentive visitor. As vision becomes less dominant, other senses awaken. The complex aroma of soil and vegetation seems stronger, no longer masked by midday heat. Sounds carry differently in the cooling air. Bird calls become more distinct, the rustling of leaves more precisely located. Touch registers the changing temperature, the increasing moisture as dew begins to form, the subtle difference between walking through the day's lingering warmth and into pockets of cooler airs that pool in the low-lying areas. Even if you cannot physically visit a forest tonight, your mind can wander these woodland paths. Scientific research suggests that simply imagining natural environments can produce some of the same physiological benefits as actually being in them: reduced heart rate, lower blood pressure, decreased activity in brain regions associated with stress, and rumination. As your body prepares for sleep, this mental forest bathing can help ease the transition from wakefulness to rest. The forest at night harbors its own distinctive community. Owls are perhaps the most iconic nocturnal forest dwellers, their specialized feathers allowing silent flight as they hunt by sound as much as by sight. The great horned owl of North America can detect the rustle of a mouse moving under snow from remarkable distances, while the tiny elf owl of southwestern deserts focuses on insects and small vertebrates. Different owl species partition the woodland habitat in time as well as space, with some hunting primarily in the early evening, others at midnight, and still others in the pre-dawn hours. Bats, the only mammals capable of true flight, become the dominant aerial insectivores after dark, replacing the swallows and swifts of daytime. Their echolocation, the use of high-frequency sound waves to create detailed acoustic maps of their surroundings, allows them to navigate through dense forest and capture flying insects with extraordinary precision. Different bat species specialize in different hunting strategies, from those that snatch insects directly from leaves or even pluck fish from water surfaces to those that pursue flying insects through open forest corridors. On the forest floor, mice and voles emerge to forage, their small size and quick movements offering some protection from predators. They are joined by animals rarely seen by day hikers, flying squirrels that glide from tree to tree on furred membranes stretching between their limbs, opossums with their prehensile tails and remarkable immune systems, raccoons with their dexterous paws exploring every crevice for food. In tropical forests, the night shift might include slow-moving lorises, whose deliberate movements help them avoid detection, or civets that play important roles in dispersing the seeds of a fruit they consume. Many of these nocturnal mammals navigate primarily by scent rather than sight. Their world is mapped in odors, territorial markings, food sources, the subtle chemical signatures of other species. This olfactory landscape remains largely imperceptible to humans, our own sense of smell being relatively muted compared to many forest mammals. When we walk in a forest, we experience perhaps 1% of the olfactory information available to a fox or a bear, a humbling reminder of how limited our perception can be. Not all forest creatures sleep or wake on a simple day-night cycle. Many follow patterns better described as polyphasic, multiple periods of activity and rest throughout the 24-hour day. Squirrels, for instance, are most active in morning and late afternoon, resting during midday heat and overnight. Some birds maintain territories through the night by singing occasionally, even while sleeping most of the time. Certain insects follow temperature rather than light, becoming active whenever conditions warm above a threshold, whether day or night. These diverse temporal niches, different times of activity, allow the forest to support more species than it could if all creatures followed the same schedule. Just as the vertical structure of the forest creates spatial niches from forest floor to canopy, the temporal structure creates openings for different lifestyles and feeding strategies. The continuous operation of the forest ecosystem, with different components active at different times, ensures that energy and nutrients cycle efficiently through the community. The night forest also hosts its own distinctive botanical events. Some flowers open only after sunset, often white or pale in color, to attract nocturnal pollinators like moths. Their fragrance typically intensifies at night, creating invisible plumes of scent that guide flying insects to their nectar. These nocturnal blooms represent an evolutionary partnership. Plants that shifted to night flowering to avoid competition for pollinators during the day, and insects that fill this nocturnal niche, often developing enhanced olfactory sensitivity to locate flowers in darkness. Even plants that don't flower at night may show nocturnal activity. Many change the position of their leaves after dark, a phenomenon called nyctinesty. Some fold their leaflets together or droop downward, reducing exposure to the night air and potentially decreasing the water loss or frost damage. Others lift their leaves at night, possibly to shed dew more efficiently or to adjust their exposure to moonlight or starlight. These movements follow circadian rhythms but can also respond to external stimuli like touch or temperature changes. As night deepens, certain regions of the forest become illuminated in subtle, surprising ways. Bioluminescent fungi, commonly known as foxfire, grow on decaying wood, producing a soft blue-green glow visible to the dark-adapted eye. These fungi don't light themselves for human benefit, of course. The leading theory suggests their luminescence attracts insects that help disperse their spores, though some researchers propose it might deter fungi-eating animals or serve as a form of communication between different parts of the fungal organism. In some forests, particularly in the tropics, insects provide even more dramatic night lighting. Fireflies, which are actually beetles, not flies, create patterns of flashing light through chemical reactions in specialized organs. These flashes form a visual communication system, with males and females of each species recognizing specific patterns. Some fireflies synchronize their flashing across large groups, creating waves of light that ripple through the forest. In Malaysia's mangrove forests, tourists travel from around the world to witness this spectacular display. Thousands of fireflies pulsing in unison along river banks. The darkness between these lights holds its own significance. Natural darkness, now endangered by light pollution across much of the developed world, plays essential roles in forest ecology. Many animals depend on darkness for protection from predators. Plants time their flowering and fruiting by sensing night length, a more reliable seasonal indicator than temperature. Numerous creatures navigate by the stars or moon, their orientation systems calibrated to natural celestial light unobscured by artificial illumination. The return of darkness to your own consciousness is equally natural and necessary. As you continue to relax, notice how your thoughts may drift between wakefulness and sleep, just as the forest transitions between day and night state. This borderland, neither fully alert nor completely unconscious, has its own unique qualities, its own ecology of mind, where memories, sensations, and imaginings intermingle like different species in a diverse woodland. In this twilight state, your brain processes the day's experiences, consolidating memories and making connections between new information and existing knowledge. Sleep researchers call the early stages of sleep hypnagogic, derived from Greek words meaning leading into sleep. During this transition, you may experience floating sensations, fragmentary mental images, or thoughts that combine logical and illogical elements. These experiences parallel the mixed nature of twilight in a forest, a time when edges blur and categories overlap. As sleep deepens, your brain continues its vital work, not shutting down but shifting to different modes of activity. During a deeper slow-wave sleep, the brain appears to perform essential maintenance functions, clearing metabolic waste and consolidating learning. During a REM sleep, when dreams occur, the brain processes emotional experiences and works through problems in creative ways. These alternating cycles of sleep types echo the forest's own rhythms, periods of activity and rest, phases of growth and consolidation, all part of the continuous renewal that sustains life. The forest persists through these cycles of day and night, of growth and rest, of life and death. Individual trees may stand for centuries, witnessing countless sunrises and sunsets, the passing of seasons, the slow drift of stars across the sky. Their longevity offers perspective on our human timescales, reminding us that our lives unfold within larger patterns that preceded us and will continue after we're gone. Yet permanence is not the forest's most important lesson. Even the oldest trees eventually fall, returning their substances to the soil. What persists is not the individual but the process, the continuous cycling of energy and matter, the ongoing dance of relationship between different forest beings. The seeming solidity of a woodland reveals itself upon closer inspection to be a flowing, changing system where nothing remains static but certain patterns endure. This vision of enduring pattern amid continuous change offers a comforting framework for understanding our own lives. We too exist within cycles of activity and rest, of growth and consolidation. We too are composed of matter that has cycled countless times through other living forms. We too participate in relationships that transcend our individual existence, the bonds between generations, the exchange of ideas across time, the rippling influence of our actions through complex social and ecological networks. As your consciousness continues to drift toward sleep, let the forest's rhythm become your own. Feel the gentle slowing of your breathing, the gradual relaxation of your muscles, the quieting of your thoughts. Just as the forest transitions from day to night without effort or resistance, allow yourself to move naturally toward rest, trusting in the renewal that sleep brings. Morning will come, as it has for countless dawns before humans walk the earth, and will for countless more after our time has passed. The forest teaches us this certainty, not through words, but through its living example, its continuous cycles of darkness and light, dormancy and growth, ending and beginning. Each sunrise brings new possibilities. Each period of rest prepares for new activity. The forest also teaches patience. Seeds may wait years for the right conditions to germinate. Trees may grow for decades before reaching the canopy and full reproductive maturity. Woodland succession, the process by which one forest community gradually transitions to another, can take centuries. These extended timescales run counter to our culture's emphasis on immediate results, offering an alternative vision of change that unfolds according to its own internal timing rather than external demands. In some sacred traditions, forests have served as places of initiation precisely because they operate on these different temporal rhythms. To enter deeply into the forest experience is to step outside ordinary time, to encounter both the ephemeral, a mayfly that lives for a single day, and the enduring, a sequoia that has stood for millennia. This juxtaposition can shift perspective, inviting reflection on what truly matters in a human life of limited duration but unlimited connection. The connections within a forest extend not just through time but across space. The longest living organism on Earth is not a single tree but a clonal colony of quaking aspens in Utah called Pando. What appears to be a forest of individual trees is actually one interconnected organism sharing a single massive root system. Estimated to weigh nearly 6,000 tons and to have been growing for at least 80,000 years, Pando represents a different way of understanding individuality and connection, a living network that has survived by adapting to changing conditions while maintaining its essential identity. Similar clonal colonies exist in many plant species, from the creosote bushes of American deserts to the bracken ferns of European woodlands. These organisms challenge our conception of what constitutes an individual, suggesting instead that life often exists as a continuum where boundaries between separate beings blur or dissolve entirely. The forest, viewed this way, becomes less a collection of discrete entities and more a flowing field of relationship. Trees connected to fungi, connected to bacteria, connected to insects, connected to birds, connected to mammals, including occasionally ourselves. This web of connection sustains the forest through difficulties that would overcome isolated individuals. When drought strikes, trees connected through mycorrhizal networks can share water with those in moister microhabitats, supporting those in drier locations. When insects attack one tree species, the chemical warning signals released can trigger defensive responses in different species nearby, creating a community-wide immune response. When one component of the system fails, others often adapt to fill its functional role, maintaining the essential processes of energy capture, nutrient cycling, and reproduction. Resilience, the capacity to absorb disturbance while maintaining function, emerges from these connections. Forest ecologists increasingly recognize that efforts to protect or restore woodlands must focus not just on preserving or reintroducing species, but on re-establishing the relationships between them. A collection of trees is not a forest. A functioning woodland requires the full complement of participants, from soil microbes to top predators, and the complex web of interactions that bind them together. The resilience of forests offers hope in our current era of environmental change and uncertainty. Despite centuries of clearing, fragmentation, and degradation, forests continue to demonstrate remarkable capacity for recovery when given appropriate conditions and time. Even in heavily urbanized regions, woodland fragments maintain significant biodiversity and ecological function. Seeds of forest trees can remain viable in soil for decades, ready to germinate when conditions improve. Trees themselves can regrow from stumps or roots after cutting, sometimes for multiple harvests spanning centuries. This capacity for renewal doesn't mean forests are invulnerable or that damage can be easily undone. Some changes, like the extinction of key species or the conversion of forest soil to other uses, can create lasting alterations to forest systems. Climate change presents unprecedented challenges, occurring too rapidly for many tree species to migrate or adapt through natural processes. The recovery of old growth conditions, the complex structure and relationships found in forests undisturbed for centuries, can take far longer than a human lifetime. Yet the forest's example suggests that healing remains possible even after significant disruption. In the aftermath of volcanic eruptions that completely destroyed existing vegetation, researchers have documented the gradual return of forest ecosystems. First, pioneer species that can tolerate harsh conditions, then increasingly complex communities. As these early arrivals modify the environment in ways that allow less tolerant species to establish, this succession doesn't reproduce exactly what existed before, but creates new functional ecosystems adapted to current conditions. Human efforts at forest restoration increasingly draw on these natural recovery processes, working with rather than against ecological succession. Rather than trying to instantly recreate mature forest by planting only climax species, successful restoration often focuses on establishing appropriate pioneer species that can survive in degraded conditions while facilitating the natural regeneration of other trees. This approach recognizes the forest not as a static arrangement of species, but as a dynamic process unfolding through time. The temporality of forests, their existence across scales of time far exceeding human perception, contains both challenge and comfort for us. The challenge lies in caring for systems whose full renewal may not occur within our lifetimes, whose responses to our actions may not become apparent for decades or centuries. The comfort comes from participating in something larger than ourselves, from aligning our brief lives with processes that preceded us and will continue long after we're gone. When we protect an existing forest or plant trees that will mature after our deaths, we express a form of care that transcends immediate self-interest. We acknowledge our embeddedness in time streams that flow beyond our individual existence. We recognize, as the Greek proverb suggests, that a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they will never sit. This intergenerational perspective has become increasingly vital in addressing environmental challenges whose time frames stretch beyond single human lifespans. As your mind continues to drift toward sleep, imagine yourself as a part of this greater time stream, connected to past and future through the continuous processes of life on Earth. The carbon atoms in your body have cycled countless times through the atmosphere, through plants, through other animals. The water in your tissues has flowed through rivers, risen as vapor, fallen as rain, perhaps rested for a time in ancient glaciers before continuing its journey. The genetic code in your cells represents an unbroken chain of successful reproduction stretching back to the earliest life forms. The forest reminds us of these connections, making visible the processes that sustain all life. When sunlight strikes a leaf, the energy captured through photosynthesis flows through the entire forest community, from plants to plant eaters to predators to decomposers and back to plants again. When rain falls on the forest canopy, its journey to the soil involves countless interactions, sliding along leaves, gathering in branch crotches, dripping to lower vegetation, filtering through layers of organic matter, entering the complex, underground world of roots and soil organisms. Following these flows of energy, water, and nutrients through the forest reveals a world where nothing exists in isolation. The largest tree and the smallest bacterium participate in the same cycles, each playing necessary roles in maintaining the system that sustains them. This ecological perspective offers an alternative to the cultural emphasis on individuality and separation that characterizes much of modern life. A reminder that our existence has always been relational, our well-being always dependent on the well-being of the larger living systems we inhabit. Indigenous peoples around the world have maintained this relational understanding of forests, seeing themselves as participants in rather than masters of woodland ecosystems. The Western Apache of the American Southwest identify themselves through stories tied to specific places in their forested homeland, their cultural identity inseparable from the landscape they inhabit. The Kayapo of the Amazon enhance forest productivity through sophisticated management practices while recognizing their dependence on the forest's generosity. The Sami of northern Scandinavia have developed intricate knowledge of boreal forest patterns that guide reindeer herding practices through seasonal changes. These indigenous perspectives don't romanticize nature or suggest that humans should avoid influencing forests. Rather, they propose a different kind of relationship, one based on reciprocity, respect, and responsibility rather than extraction and control. In many indigenous worldviews, forests are understood as communities that include humans, with both rights and responsibilities flowing between human and non-human participants. Trees, animals, and other forest beings are recognized not merely as resources but as relatives with whom humans maintain ongoing relationships characterized by mutual care. This relational approach to forests offers valuable guidance as global society seeks more sustainable ways of inhabiting Earth. It suggests that the path forward lies not in ever more intensive technical management of forests as timber factories, but in re-evaluating our place within woodland communities. How might our forestry practices change if we saw ourselves as members of rather than masters over the forest? What different questions might we ask about appropriate use of forest resources? How might our institutions and economies be redesigned to recognize and support the full range of values that forests provide? Forests offer resources far beyond timber and fuel. They provide a habitat for countless species, many with potential benefits for humanity not yet discovered or understood. They regulate water cycles, reducing flooding and maintaining stream flow during dry periods. They modify local and regional climate through evapotranspiration and albedo effects. They reduce erosion, maintain soil fertility, and filter pollutants from air and water. They sequester carbon, mitigating climate change. They offer spaces for recreation, spiritual renewal, and aesthetic appreciation. These diverse values, what economists call ecosystem services, often go unrecognized in conventional economic accounting. Timber appears on balance sheets. The water purification function of a forest watershed typically does not. The market value of mahogany lumber is calculated precisely. The contribution of mahogany trees to carbon sequestration or biodiversity conservation rarely factors into harvest decisions. This incomplete accounting has led to systematic undervaluation of intact forests and contributed to their replacement with other land uses that generate more immediate financial returns but fewer total benefits. Efforts to address this market failure have taken various forms. Some focus on creating payment mechanisms for ecosystem services, where beneficiaries of forest functions like downstream water users or global citizens concerned about climate change compensate forest owners or managers for maintaining these services. Others work to reform supply chains so that forest products reflect the full costs of sustainable production. Still others advocate for expanded protected areas where non-extractive forest values take priority over timber harvest or conversion to agriculture. The effectiveness of these approaches varies widely depending on local conditions, institutional arrangements, and broader socioeconomic contexts. What works in Norway may fail in Nigeria, successful strategies in Brazil might prove counterproductive in Bangladesh. The diversity of forests themselves is matched by the diversity of human communities that depend on and care for them, suggesting that no single solution will apply universally. The path toward more sustainable forest relationships will likely involve many different approaches tailored to specific ecological and cultural contexts. Despite this complexity, or perhaps because of it, forests continue to inspire hope. Their demonstrated resilience, their capacity for renewal, and their ongoing provision of essential services even in degraded conditions suggest that working with forest systems rather than against them offers viable pathways forward. Their existence across timescales far exceeding human generations reminds us that our actions today shape possibilities for countless future lives. Their intricate networks of relationship provide models for human communities seeking more connected, cooperative ways of inhabiting Earth. As your consciousness continues its gentle transition toward sleep, Let the wisdom of forests inform your rest. Just as woodland systems move through cycles of activity and renewal, your body and mind require periods of repose to function optimally. Sleep is not merely the absence of wakefulness, but an active state with its own vital purposes: memory consolidation, emotional processing, physical repair. Like the forest at night, your sleeping mind continues essential work beneath the surface of awareness. In the quiet darkness behind your closed eyes, billions of neurons communicate in patterns that maintain your body's functions while processing the day's experiences. Dreams may come, those curious narratives that combine memory fragments with creative associations, perhaps serving to simulate situations and emotions in a safe context. The architecture of your sleep cycles, alternating between deeper slow-wave states and more active REM periods, creates a rhythm not unlike the forest's own oscillations between activity and rest. Morning will bring a new day, just as it has for countless dawns before humans walked the earth. The forest teaches us this certainty, not through words but through its living example, its continuous cycles of darkness and light. Each sunrise brings a renewed energy for photosynthesis, for growth, for all the countless interactions that sustain the woodland community. Each period of rest prepares for new activity, new response to changing conditions, new expression of life's persistent creativity. You are part of these ancient rhythms, your body's cycles aligned with patterns established long before our species evolved. The roughly 24-hour circadian rhythm that governs your sleep-wake cycle resonates with Earth's rotation period. The hormonal fluctuations that influence your energy levels throughout the day reflect adaptations to the planet's daily light cycles. Even your breathing follows patterns that connect you to all other living beings, taking in what trees release, releasing what trees require. This connection extends beyond metaphor. The oxygen you breathe was likely produced within the past few years by photosynthesis in forests, grasslands, or ocean phytoplankton. The carbon in your tissues came from plants you've consumed, which in turn captured it from atmospheric carbon dioxide. The water in your body has cycled countless times through other organisms, through soil, through clouds. You exist as a temporary configuration of materials that have passed through countless other living forms and will do so again in future. Recognizing these connections doesn't diminish your individuality, but places it within a larger context, the continuous flow of energy and matter through Earth's living systems. The forest offers a visible manifestation of these flows, a place where the abstract becomes concrete through the living examples of trees, animals, fungi, and microorganisms participating in cycles that sustain not just the woodland but all life on Earth. As sleep approaches, let your thoughts drift like leaves floating on a forest stream, carried by currents beyond your direction. Release the effort to control or analyze your experience. Trust in the natural process of rest, just as the forest trusts in the coming of dawn after darkness, of spring after winter, of new growth after disturbance. Your conscious mind can relinquish its vigilance, allowing deeper systems to continue their work of renewal and integration. In that gentle letting go, you participate in something the forest demonstrates continuously: the balance between effort and surrender, between individual action and participation in larger patterns. trees actively grow toward light, their tissues organize to maximize photosynthesis within the constraints of their location. Yet they also yield to wind rather than rigidly resisting, bend with the weight of snow, and ultimately return to soil when their life cycles complete. Their existence combines purposeful growth with graceful acceptance of natural limits. This balance offers wisdom for human lives, often characterized by striving without sufficient rest, by effort without adequate renewal. The forest's example suggests a different rhythm, periods of growth balanced by periods of consolidation, outward achievement complemented by inward reflection, active engagement alternating with receptive openness. Not a simple division between doing and being, but a continuous dance between the two, each making the other possible. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine the forest at night one final time, the gentle movement of air through leaves, the occasional soft calls of nocturnal creatures, the silver-blue quality of moonlight filtering through branches. Feel yourself held within this larger living system, supported by Earth's continuous cycles of renewal. Trust in the wisdom of your body and mind to integrate the day's experiences and prepare for tomorrow's possibilities. The forest will continue its quiet work through the hours of darkness, respiration in leaves and roots, sap moving through vascular tissues, mycorrhizal networks exchanging nutrients between trees, nocturnal pollinators visiting night-blooming flowers. These processes require no conscious direction, no effort beyond the inherent tendency of life to maintain and express itself. Your own body possesses this same inherent wisdom, this same capacity for self-regulation and renewal during rest. As sleep deepens, your connection with these words will fade, but the forest's lessons remain, carried not just in conscious thought, but in the very substances of your body, in the ancient evolutionary heritage that links you to all living beings. Tomorrow, you may not remember the specific facts or images from tonight's journey, but perhaps something of the forest's rhythm, its patient resilience, its interconnected strength will inform your waking hours. For now, rest in the knowledge that you participate in life's continuous renewal, like a seed nestled in fertile soil, like a forest waiting through winter's dormancy. Your consciousness settles into the quiet darkness that precedes awakening. Sleep well, dream peacefully, and remember that you are never truly separate from the great green breathing world of which we all form part. Good night.